wherein Elnora goes to high school and learns many lessons not found in her books. Elnora Comstock. "Have you lost your senses?" demanded the angry voice of Catherine Comstock while she glared at her daughter. "Why, mother?" faltered the girl. "Don't you, why, mother, me?" cried Mrs. Comstock. "You know very well what I mean. You've given me no peace until you've had your way about this going to school business. I've fixed you good enough, and you're ready to start. But no child of mine walks the streets of Onabasha looking like a play actress woman. You wet your hair and comb it down modest and decent, and then be off. Or you'll have no time to find where you belong." Elnora gave one despairing glance at the white face, framed in a most becoming riot of reddish-brown hair, which she saw in the little kitchen mirror. Then she untied the narrow black ribbon, wet the comb and plastered the waving curls close to her head, bound them fast, pinned on the skimpy black hat and opened the back door. "You've gone so plumb daffy you are forgetting your dinner," jeered her mother. "I don't want anything to eat," replied Elnora. "You'll take your dinner or you'll not go one step. Are you crazy? Walk almost 3 miles and no food from 6 in the morning until 6 at night. A pretty figure you'd cut if you had your way. And after I've gone and bought you this nice new pail and filled it a special to start on." Elnora came back with a face still whiter and picked up the lunch. "Thank you, mother. Goodbye," she said. Mrs. Comstock did not reply. She watched the girl follow the long walk to the gate and go from sight on the road, in the bright sunshine of the first Monday of September. "I bet $1 she gets enough of it by night," commented Mrs. Comstock. Elnora walked by instinct, for her eyes were blinded with tears. She left the road where it turned south. At the corner of the Limberlost, climbed a snake fence and entered a path worn by her own feet. Dodging under willow and scrub oak branches, she came at last to the faint outline of an old trail made in the days when the precious timber of the swamp was guarded by armed men. This path she followed until she reached a thick clump of bushes. From the debris in the end of a hollow log, she took a key that unlocked the padlock of a large, weather-beaten old box, inside of which lay several books, a butterfly apparatus, and a small cracked mirror. The walls were lined thickly with gaudy butterflies, dragonflies, and moths. She set up the mirror and, once more pulling the ribbon from her hair, she shook the bright mass over her shoulders, tossing it dry in the sunshine. Then she straightened it, bound it loosely, and replaced her hat. She tugged vainly at the low brown calico collar and gazed despairingly at the generous length of the narrow skirt. She lifted it as she would have cut it if possible. That disclosed the heavy high leather shoes, at sight of which she seemed positively ill, and hastily dropped the skirt. She opened the pail, removed the lunch, wrapped it in the napkin, and placed it in a small pasteboard box. Locking the case again, she hid the key and hurried down the trail. She followed it around the north end of the swamp and then entered a footpath crossing a farm leading in the direction of the spires of the city to the northeast. Again she climbed a fence and was on the open road. For an instant she leaned against the fence staring before her, then turned and looked back. Behind her lay the land on which she had been born to drudgery and a mother who made no pretense of loving her. Before her lay the city through whose schools she hoped to find means of escape and the way to reach the things for which she cared. When she thought of how she appeared, she leaned more heavily against the fence and groaned. When she thought of turning back and wearing such clothing in ignorance all the days of her life, she set her teeth firmly and went hastily toward Onabasha. On the bridge crossing a deep culvert at the suburbs, she glanced around, and then kneeling she thrust the lunchbox between the foundation and the flooring. This left her empty-handed as she approached the big stone high school building. She entered bravely and inquired her way to the office of the superintendent. There she learned that she should have come the previous week and arranged about her classes. There were many things incident to the opening of school, and one man unable to cope with all of them. "Where have you been attending school?" he asked, while he advised the teacher of domestic science not to telephone for groceries until she knew how many she would have in her classes. Wrote an order for chemicals for the students of science, and advised the leader of the orchestra to hire a professional to take the place of the bass violist, reported suddenly ill. "I finished last spring at Brushwood School, District Number 9, said Elnora. "I have been studying all summer. I am quite sure I can do the first-year work. If I have a few days to get started." Of course, assented the superintendent. "Almost invariably country pupils do good work. You may enter first year, and if it is too difficult, we will find it out speedily. Your teachers will tell you the list of books you must have, and if you will come with me, I will show you the way to the auditorium. It is now time for opening exercises. Take any seat you find vacant." Elnora stood before the entrance and stared into the largest room she ever had seen. The floor sloped to a yawning stage on which a band of musicians, grouped around a grand piano, were tuning their instruments. She had two fleeting impressions: that it was all a mistake, this was no school, but a grand display of enormous ribbon bows. And the second, that she was sinking, and had forgotten how to walk. Then a burst from the orchestra nerved her, while a bevy of daintily clad, sweet-smelling things that might have been birds, or flowers, or possibly gaily dressed, happy young girls, pushed her forward. She found herself plodding across the back of the auditorium, praying for guidance, to an empty seat. As the girls passed her, vacancies seemed to open to meet them. Their friends were moving over, beckoning and whispering invitations. Everyone else was seated. But no one paid any attention to the white-faced girl stumbling half-blindly down the aisle next the farthest wall. So she went on to the very end facing the stage. No one moved, and she could not summon courage to crowd past others to several empty seats she saw. At the end of the aisle, she paused in desperation, while she stared back at the whole forest of faces, most of which were now turned upon her. In a flash came the full realization of her scanty dress, her pitiful little hat and ribbon, her big, heavy shoes, her ignorance of where to go or what to do, and from a sickening wave which crept over her, she felt she was going to become very ill. Then out of the mass she saw a pair of big, brown boy eyes, 3 seats from her, and there was a message in them. Without moving his body, he reached forward and with a pencil touched the back of the seat before him. Instantly, Elnora took another step which brought her to a row of vacant front seats. She heard laughter behind her. The knowledge that she wore the only hat in the room burned her. Every matter of moment, and some of none at all, cut and stung. She had no books. Where should she go when this was over? What would she give to be on the trail going home? She was shaking with a nervous chill when the music ceased, and the superintendent arose, and coming down to the front of the flower-decked platform, opened a Bible and began to read. Elnora did not know what he was reading, and she felt that she did not care. Wildly she was racking her brain to decide whether she should sit still when the others left the room or follow, and ask someone where the freshman went first. In the midst of the struggle, one sentence fell on her ear. "Hide me under the shadow of thy wings." Elnora began to pray frantically. "Hide me, oh God, hide me, under the shadow of thy wings."